Are you ready to navigate the new way to work? Forbes Books presents Dare to Care in the Workplace with Kathleen Quinn Botaw. Here's Kathleen.
My guest this week is Ranjay Gulati. Ranjay is a Harvard Business School professor and author of 6 best-selling books on the subject of strategy, organizational effectiveness, and leadership in organization. His latest, Deep Purpose, The Heart and Soul of High-Performance Companies, is available now. Ranjay, welcome to the podcast.
Kathleen, it's my pleasure to be here with you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So I wanted to start the discussion with so many companies are searching for purpose and connection to their people. What would you say is the most important thing for them to focus on?
Well, I think the biggest thing that people haven't understood is that purpose is not a tax on business. Purpose is good for business. And it's not that we should have a purpose now. I think purpose is something that all of us need to think about for ourselves individually, but also for the collectives like organizations where we work. I think it's just somehow we've come to that realization about now, which is a good thing, but I wish it would have happened sooner.
Well, and I think it was happening well before the pandemic, don't you?
I completely agree with you. And I think actually, if you go back to the research on this subject and companies, back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, even through the 50s, there was a groundswell of movement about talking about the purpose of business. Even the Harvard Business School purpose statement used to be to teach our leaders how to make a decent profit decently. And so there was and somehow in the kind of whole discussion around the Friedman doctrine about shareholder value, somehow, somewhere, we kind of got confused.
And where do you think we got confused?
Well, sometimes things happen, good intentions sometimes lead to unintended consequences. And I think what was happening was there was a few bad apples out there who were taking advantage of publicly traded companies like their own, and so there was a backlash against professional managers who were abusing the privilege of being a CEO or a leader. And so there was a backlash saying, hey, don't forget you work for shareholders. That is not your money. That's not your privilege. And you have to be working to make sure you deliver value for shareholders who are entrusting you with their capital. Now, this idea got taken to its logical conclusion that maybe you work only for shareholders and we can measure you on shareholder returns and we're going to hold you accountable for that. In that process, we forgot that businesses have positive and negative spillovers with society, with other stakeholders, and how do we need to think about that? You don't exist in isolation, but you exist in communities, you exist on the planet, you exist with employees, you have to serve the customers you have. All these things all up in play while serving shareholders as well.
Totally agree. It's a complete ecosystem, right? And I always say to my audiences and the people I speak to and serve that it's a great myth that people actually work for companies. They actually work for their families. Would you agree with that statement?
Well, it's really interesting you asked that question. There's actually been some research on this. They're like, why do you go to work? Right? Of course, we all go to work to make a livelihood for our families. But they've looked at primary orientation of going to work. Why do you really go to work? And it turns out there are 3 broad buckets into which the responses fall. The first one is I do my work as a job to make a livelihood for my family. The second bucket is I do my job as a career path because I want to get ahead in my career. I have a goal of where I want to get to. And the third one is I do my work as a calling. It gives me intrinsic meaning. Now, even people who want meaning also want to get paid. Don't get me wrong, but what is your primary orientation of engaging with work? Amazingly, there's a fairly large number of people who see their work as a calling.
And where does dignity fall into all that? The dignity and purpose that you talk about?
Well, I think that's what you start to look for is when you start to imagine more from work than just a paycheck, right? And how organizations are able to connect to their employees in a way that is more than a transaction. And suddenly now work gives us meaning and purpose in our lives. And so now life purpose has many components to it. Work is just one of them, but at least work also brings meaning into our life. And so we don't talk about work life balance. Think about that phrase. Work life balance implies that work is disconnected from my life. Work
Correct.
is kind of a necessary evil. I do it and then I go live my life after I leave work. Work becomes an integral part of our lives too.
Hmm.
And as so many leaders say, we spend so much time at work. It should give us meaning the way other things we do give us meaning.
We should love what we do, at least most of the time when we're working. And, so many people out there struggling with loving what they're doing and also having this, what I call post traumatic job syndrome. They've been trained not to ask for what they need or not to ask, I'd like to do this because I love it more. So, how can companies close that gap between the employers and the employees so more of the employees do more of what they love every day versus doing what they hate?
So there are two parts to that comment that you made that I think is very insightful. That, we know that people want to do work that they enjoy, right? They like to do or love to do, So there is a what you might call the job design that make my work interesting,
Hmm.
make my work something that I really enjoy doing. A separate construct is make my work meaningful. Meaning
Yes.
is bigger than enjoyment, right? Meaning is I actually feel like I'm contributing to something bigger than myself, right? Oh, I never realized that I'm making screws that go into an aircraft engine that bring people home safely.
Hmm.
So I think how do I make work interesting is one idea. The other one is how do I make my work meaningful, which is a
Hmm.
separate. And I think organizations in the labor market we're in today, we have to deliver both. And I think is into this, you've added another word, which is dignity. There's also inspiration. Do I feel inspired at work? I mean, look at the turnover of nurses right now in the United States.
Yes.
It's amazing. You look at other occupations and you say, what is going on? And you realize that, for the longest time, the pay hasn't kept up with the commensurate with their skills and effort they put into what they do. How do we need to think about that profession differently?
And I find, that inspiration at work. And when I meet with business leaders, key executives, they seem so tired right now and they don't seem to know what to do next. What do you think the first step is for them? They are uninspired. So when you have a leadership team that's tired and uninspired, how do they inspire their people?
Well, let's think about it. There's a couple of things going on. First of all, we have to cut everybody a break. The times are really unprecedented.
Yes.
We have global war, we have inflation, we have a pandemic that doesn't seem to go away, we have political uncertainty, technological change, deglobalization, and I can go on and on and on, right?
Hmm.
Things coming at business leaders today are nonstop. Now, in this kind of turbulent turmoil, how do you kind of keep your sanity and keep directional clarity? So, first of all, purpose is an anchor, or what I like to call a compass, an orienting framework to remind ourselves where are we going and why are we doing it. So I think it becomes important in these turbulent, and I've looked at a number of companies that went through dramatic turnarounds, meaning they were in huge distress. Lego being one of them, Microsoft being another one, Etsy being another one. And these leaders who turn these organizations around talk about purpose as really a powerful compass in a very difficult moment. That's one. The other part you ask is how do you bring energy to yourself?
Hmm.
You want to help others who work for you, but how about yourself? And I think that's a hugely important question. And you're absolutely right. If leaders themselves don't feel inspired, they can't inspire anybody else. And now the question is, how do you find that inner inspiration? How do I connect to my own purpose? And this is where you start to look for an interesting connection between the organization's purpose and our own personal individual purpose.
Hmm.
Do they intersect? If they don't, there's a disconnect over here that I have my life purpose and this is my organization purpose, and they don't even connect at all. So what am I doing here? How do we create that connection? The head of HR at Microsoft, Kathleen Hogan, said to me, because they really try hard to get this to happen, you
Hmm.
don't really work for Microsoft until Microsoft works for you.
Yes, I saw that in one of your writings. Beautiful. It's that alignment of corporate values and purpose with your values and purpose, that kind of alignment when it all is working well together. And the company respects you as a human, and the human respects the company. That's where the magic happens.
It's interesting you use the word magic because I heard this word first from Pete Carroll, the coach of the Seattle Seahawks. That when an individual connects their own personal reason for being with the organization's reason for being, magic happens because people elevate their game. It's not a transaction, it's not a contract, it's a commitment. And you do things with a greater sense of responsibility, a greater sense of trust, and how you show up changes. And I think that's why I think it's important to understand that purpose is an unlock. Yesterday I talked to the founder of the largest rideshare company in the Middle East and Africa, and he said purpose is our superpower.
Mm. That's beautiful. It's a superpower, it's a compass. How did he define that?
So he talked about how they got into the business in the first place, that they understood that they were going to be solving a massive problem for customers, but also societies where people don't have access to mobility solutions. And it disproportionately affects women more than men. In
Mhm.
socially conservative societies, women had to travel with their male relatives. And if nobody's available, then they are kind of stuck. How do you create those solutions to understand that you are solving not just a business customer problem for which you can get paid, but that there are social consequences of what you do? And when employees understand that, when founders understand that we are here to do something that is going to have a profound impact on the world, I think every one of us inside us has what people have called the hero's journey. We all want to do something big and meaningful. And in the case of this company, Kareem, one of the co founders, had a near death experience. And that experience made him wake up and say, I need to do something profound and meaningful in this world before I leave it.
I totally resonate with that because I'm a cancer survivor. And when I think, whether you believe in God or not, I do it, when the universe or God gives you that opportunity to realize your moment here is very brief, you become much more profound on how you, and much more purposeful, sir, to your point in deep purpose of how you spend your time. I don't wish that on anybody, but it's so remarkable that people who have those experiences, they lead with such purpose.
Well, thank you for sharing that, first of all, Kathleen. And I want to say one thing is that I always ask myself, why does it take a crisis to wake us up?
Hmm.
I recently read a book where somebody quoted something from Buddhism, which says, wake up, your time is running out.
Yes, it's profound. Just like your comment that purpose is our compass, our why. Simon Sinek talks about our why. The purpose being the compass is brilliant. And it really focuses on the employee experience. In my book, Dare to Care in the Workplace, I have a whole chapter dedicated to the employee experience because I have a belief that if the employee has a great experience, guess what? So does everybody else around them, including your customers. What would you say about the employee experience to those people that you lead and our listeners today?
Well, first of all, the labor market has woken everybody up to the idea. I think you were very prescient and ahead of your times, right? Because I think now the labor market speaks for itself. So if you don't, you are absolutely at risk of losing top talent. It's a very simple but profound insight that you take care of your employees take care of your customers, And when you take care, customers are taken care of, naturally good things happen for your shareholders.
Mhm.
My colleagues over here had written about the service profit chain and talked about this idea. There are so many, but somehow we lose the causal model. We say, no, 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 I'll focus on shareholders and maybe the customers and employees will come along with me. Or I myself am guilty of this. I wrote a book about a decade ago, around putting customers at the center of your business. And my idea was that, oh, no, no, businesses need to get everything lined up around the customers. And even employees need to think about customers. But you can't magically get everyone to focus on customers. I think
Mhm.
you need to have the employee connection. And you're absolutely right. And I think I stand corrected that um, you got to put employees first. And when you put employees first, but when you put employees first, you got to orient them somehow. You
Yes.
can't just say this is a pandering exercise, because I have seen, for instance, in the case of Etsy, when I was looking at the turnaround, they had an employee first model, but there was nobody second. Customers were
Mhm.
not second. So it was employees for the sake of employees. They had yoga classes, they had all kinds of goodies and benefits for them. And meanwhile, the business was going down. So I think, yes, employees first, but then you got to direct the employees towards customers.
The connection of what are we here for and what are we trying to achieve together? You matter, the customer matters, we all matter. I, as the employer, also matter. It's not one or the other. It's not any one audience. Each audience has a point of view.
But there's a
And you,
conundrum there. There's a
mhm.
conundrum there. Because now you have three, four audiences, each of whom doesn't want the same thing necessarily. And now you're going to have to make some hard trade offs and choices. Because you can't give customers everything, and maybe the employees everything, and society everything, and stakeholders, other shareholders everything. And so now I recently wrote an article called The Messiness of Purpose, because what I was finding was a lot of talk about win-win, that, oh, everybody can win. And what I was learning was, and as I was looking at companies, I said, no, 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 it's win-win is a rare thing. Most of life is taking from Peter to give to Paul.
Or at
And
least a negotiation, right? I mean, at
true, I
least
like that.
at least a negotiation. You say the messiness of purpose. I love it. And if we think about it, for those of us who might be in relationships with significant others, aren't those messy to negotiate purposefully?
Absolutely, absolutely. But here's the challenge. In this case, the counterparties are not sitting across you. So I have to imagine what an imaginary customer sitting there wants and an imaginary employee wants. And within those communities, there are diversities of views. Some want A, some want B, some want C.
Mhm.
So I am scratching my head saying, okay, I'll just tell you the Etsy story again. It's fascinating because, I told you they were losing money. They had stopped they were focused on the sellers, but not the buyers in the Etsy marketplace. And yet, without buyers, there are no sellers in a marketplace. And employees were loving it. And so the first thing he does is realize that they have too many employees. So, got to lay off people so you can survive as a business. They were going to go down. And the employees were up in arms because he laid off 250 people right in the first few months. They're like, horrible human being. And then saying, we're going to shift focus from sellers to buyers. And then the sellers are like, wait a minute, you're messing up my business model. And you're like, yeah, I'm messing up your business model, but the buyers hate the way you sell.
Mhm.
So you see what I'm saying? So suddenly now you're adjudicating across stakeholders, and it's a messy business, and navigating through that, you're going to take some, arrows coming at you.
And you all have to be brave, but you can't please everyone. We've all heard the saying, you can please all the people some of the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time. All right, we have a lot more to get to, Ranjay, but we have to take a break. Coming up in the second part of my conversation with Harvard Business School professor Ranjay Gulati, the author of Deep Purpose, Ranjay shares what leaders need to ask themselves when it comes to attracting the right talent.
What kind of people do I want to attract into my organization? And what would that look like? I think compensation is an important part, pay for performance is a very important part of it, but you are leaving a lot on the table if that's all you have to offer.
This has been Dare to Care in the Workplace. To connect with Kathleen, go to KathleenQuinnBotaw.com. Kathleen's book, Dare to Care, is available wherever books are sold. Dare to Care in the Workplace is a production of Forbes Books.